We're going to talk this morning about answering the question or the argument of will there be an Antichrist? This is a really good study, I guess, in a sense. It can be, I guess, a little more in-depth maybe if you were wanting to get kind of that direction. But I think what you'll find is that it's pretty easily refuted when we go to Scripture. But ultimately, what we'll find is that there's going to be coming an individual. Maybe you've heard of someone, you think of the Antichrist. I can remember even in the short time that I've been here on this earth, the political people who would be elected or one thing and another, and they're the Antichrist, right? We've probably heard that. Probably some that are been here a little longer than I have probably have heard of other people. And again, you can go back through history, all these things, and make these things line up if you try to put them in there. But ultimately, what we're looking at, what I could find, again, consistently, is that there's going to be an individual that's going to come to power, and he's going to kind of rule the whole world. He's going to come in a sense of peace, and he's going to be talking about all these good things, promising all these good things. Everybody's going to like him. He's going to be a real charismatic kind of individual. Everybody's going to really get behind him. And then what we're going to find is he's going to do that for 3.5 years, and then after the 3.5 years, he's going to turn, and he's going to become a very wicked man. He's going to be a very evil man. You're going to have to take the mark of the beast. After that, you won't be able to, if you don't have the mark, you won't be able to buy and sell anything. And then after the 3.5 years, he will be destroyed when Jesus comes back. Again, remember where we're at in the premillennial timeline. Perhaps, we have the tribulation, and perhaps we're raptured before in the middle. If you go to the pre-trib, again, all this, we're going into heaven. That's what they teach. But anyway, they go into heaven, and we have the 7 years of tribulation, and that's when the Antichrist shows up just as a regular person. 3.5 years in, he turns evil. Then it's persecution, the great tribulation we talked about last week. And then Jesus returns with all those who are raptured, all the saints. And then we have the Battle of Armageddon. And then you begin the 1,000-year reign of Christ here on earth and all that. But nonetheless, if you believe in the mid-trib, then you have the 3.5 years of good times with the Antichrist when he's good, and then before it gets really bad, you ascend into heaven with Jesus. But anyway, again, it depends on who you read. It depends on who you listen to. It depends on what stance they have on these things of when all these things will be. But typically we find that there will be, or people say, again, respectively, across all that, there's going to be the Antichrist, an Antichrist. So let's go to these passages, and we're going to kind of look at, we won't maybe read all of these, but we're going to be looking at some of these where they're talking about this man. Now again, let's kind of go through this. I put Matthew 24:15 up here because we talked about that last week. And we were reminded, Matthew chapter 24, looking there in verse 15, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Now again, this is going to be bringing about the great tribulation there in verse 21. So again, that's if you follow along with that kind of idea, is the Antichrist is here. He's a good guy, and then he turns bad. And when he turns bad, then the great tribulation starts. And that's the passages that they'll teach that will try to teach that principle. Also, they will go to 2 Thessalonians. This is a good one that a lot of them go to. 2 Thessalonians 2. And they'll be talking about the man of sin, the son of perdition. We won't read all that, but we'll talk about, Paul is saying, let no man deceive you. There has to be a falling away first, there in verse 3, then that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. This man who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So this man's coming. Let's see if there's another one. Verse 9, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. That'll be important when we get into Revelation 13 here. So this man, right, this lawless one's coming. This man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist. So then they'll go to Revelation 13. Let's kind of go over there. And they'll look at this man, again, this beast that is described by John in the Revelation. This beast. And again, we find him, and they, verse 4, and they worshipped, Revelation 13:4, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. So that's what they're saying. The dragon, Satan. Satan gives power to the Antichrist. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And again, mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given them to continue 40 and 2 months. That's the 3.5 years. So really 13 is all of it. I'm trying to pick and choose through that. But anyway, that's where they'll go. Then also, they'll go over here to Daniel. Book of Daniel. And maybe, I'm not going to get, I'll try to get as far as we need to. We're going to refute all of these, by the way. So I'll try to get into a little bit of that, but I may need to, if you got some questions concerning some of the stuff in Daniel, probably going to have to stop and teach Daniel at one time. I know it was funny, I was thinking about that. My uncle, when I was in Waynesboro, when I was a teenager, probably Carson's age, he was teaching our teenage class, and we got done. He said, what do y'all boys want to learn next? And a real good friend of mine, Will Gallion, he's like, I want to learn Revelation. And my uncle was like, no. And then I said, well, what about Daniel? Because again, many of us, if you read the first 6 chapters of Daniel, Daniel lines den, Nebuchadnezzar and all that stuff. I said, what about Daniel? He said, no. He said, did y'all talk about that before class? I said, no. Because what I found out later was the prophecies in Daniel after Daniel 6 is worth some consideration. So they'll go to this man, then Daniel chapter 7. They'll kind of look at this little horn there in verse 8 that he is speaking. Let's see, stamped on the feet, fire stream thousands. The little beast, or the little horn there, I was thinking he was speaking great lies and things like that. And they'll kind of look at him, and they'll say, look, see, that's the Antichrist there, that little horn. Oh, yeah, they're going 25 of Daniel 7:25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given unto his hand, even a time and times and divided of times. So 3.5 years. But anyway, yeah, so Daniel 7, then they'll go to Daniel 8, beginning there in 23, talking about in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not of his own power. Again, remember, power of the devil. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policies also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. And he shall also stand against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And all that. So that's where they're going to go many times. When you're going to talk to someone, if you listen, again, I know maybe those closer to my age and younger, if you go on the internet or in a social media platform type device, all you got to do is start clicking, and you can find a lot. And that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be taking all these verses out of context and trying to apply them. But I will say, as we begin to refute all of these, who did I not say in any of that? What word or name have I not mentioned since we started looking at these verses? The Antichrist. Very good. In none of these passages do we read about Antichrist. None of these passages say this is the Antichrist. What we're looking at are just rulers and individuals and these people that are in these positions that are going to be doing this, and it is vital that we look. In fact, we're going to show you at the end, I'll show you at the end of this lesson, the Bible does have the word Antichrist in it, but it ain't anywhere around these passages. So we're going to kind of look at that as well. So any questions before we begin to refute these? All right. Now, if you're here and you're like, all right, I'm waiting for this. I don't know, Ben. That sounds pretty good. Sounds like it might line up. Well, let's look at it. All right, Matthew chapter 24. I think we'll start there because that's the easiest one to refute. I would imagine, I would hope anyway, I hope, that through our study last week of the tribulation, that many of us would read that and think, all right, we don't know who the abomination of desolation may be. Again, I think it's the Roman emperors or the Roman generals coming in there, Vespasian at the beginning, to march against Jerusalem. But we say, all right, we know it's not a futuristic man. Because why? Why can I have such security? Because this Antichrist is, again, going to have to stand in the holy place. He's got to stand in the temple. And there is a Muslim mosque on the temple grounds there in Jerusalem. The temple isn't anywhere near being rebuilt. So I don't have to worry about the Antichrist anytime soon because the temple is not going to be rebuilt. What we find then is in context. If I follow this and take it all together, what I read is that if I do see the abomination of desolation that Daniel talks about, which is what we were going into there in some of the prophecies, if I see that, then I have got to flee. I've got to leave. I've got to get out of here, and I've got to go to the mountains. So, again, not to make fun, I don't know it's going to sound like it, but, we got to go to, I guess, the Smokies or the Rockies. I don't know. But when we say that, we think, well, Ben, all right. But again, in the context, that's what Jesus is telling them to do. Is when you see if this is the Antichrist, if I see the Antichrist, what Jesus is telling me to do is to get out of Jerusalem. Well, see, that really gives me some problems if I try to apply it to us today in 2026. I just can't really get Matthew 24 to fit in there unless, again, I'm reading into the text, and I want to have this abomination of desolation who is going to be bringing about these great woes and sorrows and tribulations. Any comments on that? All right. I'm not going to get real deep into some of these. Again, if we want to get into them, I may have to go back and teach it a little bit differently. But this is going to be what I'm going to try to do is if you just had someone that said, Matthew 24:15 says the Antichrist is coming, you'll be able to be like, well, what about this? That's what we're trying to do in this. Again, if you want to get into some deep study, we can later. But right now, let's just go at it at this. 2 Thessalonians 2:1-12, we pointed that out just a minute ago. The idea, again, that the temple has to be rebuilt, right? The temple's got to be rebuilt. If we're going to look at it, that he is going to stand there in verse 4, that he sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So we have to have this ruler rise up. The temple has to be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and he has to be behaving himself in such a way that he is acting as God. Now, the nail in the coffin, 2 Thessalonians 2:1-12, if someone points to this and says, this is the Antichrist, Ben, this is this falling away, right? The man of sin, son of perdition. Verse 7, Paul says, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now will let until he be taken out of the way. So what's happening, Paul's telling us, is whatever was going on, whomever, there's some good debate within this. If you ask me right now, I would think it was the beginning of this idea of the elders becoming the bishop and beginning to take this position as sole authority to a congregation. If you remember way back when we were talking about church history, remember that's how we kind of got to Catholicism. It's like our elders, and one of them says, I'm going to be the head elder, and then I'm the head elder of Crockett County, and we kind of go from that. So in a sense, that man would be exalting himself, having the authority to do these things, but it was already working. There's a great argument that it's the Jewish high priest, that when Christ was crucified, he is now our high priest, right? We're not under Jewish rule, and that the high priest is still in power, acting as this high priest, this mediator between God and man, when Christ is. And there's a good argument for that it was the high priest still being in Jerusalem, because he would be in the temple, he would be there, and he would be kind of setting himself up as God's servant there, being the high priest, going into the Holy of Holies, trying to abolish sin when Christ is already dead. So really, again, without getting too deep into any kind of theological stuff, if someone came up to you and like, this is the Antichrist, you could say, well, Paul says, whomever this is already working. This is not a futuristic 2026 prophecy, because it's already starting, it's already happening then. All right? Revelation 13. This is going to be hard to kind of get in here in just a little bit, but there's going to be some points we want to kind of draw out. Again, we hear the beast. He's typically called, they refer to this beast as the Antichrist. But again, when we take Revelation into consideration, in Revelation 1:1 that this is given to the 7 churches of Asia, and these things will come about shortly. We have to be recalled of all these things. And notice even in verse 1, and he sent and signified it by his angel. So these were written in symbolic languages. So when I read about a beast, there is a symbol of this. So when we talk about, there in verse 1, and I stood upon the sands of the sea and saw a beast rise out of the sea, or rise out of the population of the world, having 7 heads. 7 heads. Rome was a city that was built on 7 hills. So that's worth considering. And we find that upon his horns 10 crowns. So the horns, or the crowns being that crowns of power, being 10 kings. So that's really what what Revelation 13 is talking about. The beast is Rome, is the Roman Empire. It's Rome coming about in this power. It's mentioning this, and again, the idea of the emperor and the beast, or the entity of Rome. And obviously they were worshiping Satan in the sense that they were putting up Roman emperors as God. They were divinity. They were like gods. So not Jehovah God, but God, the new emperor, in that sense. Again, connecting the Roman Empire with the Roman Catholic Church. The Pope today is God's mouthpiece on earth. So again, kind of going back to that idea, exalting himself up to be like God. The Pope, he's got the power to change things here on earth. Whatever God may say, he can change it. Now again, you get into this idea when you go down through there, just to kind of hit on this in verse 16, he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand and on their foreheads, and this no man might buy or sell, save he that hath the mark and the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That's important, and his number is 666, so 666. You don't have to worry about the mark of the beast, 666. You don't have to worry about if you want to get your debit card implanted in your hand. You don't have to worry about that being the mark of the beast. This is not referring to anything that's going to be happening in 2026 or further. The Jews, the Christians in that time period of Rome, we're going to kind of get into some of this here in just a minute. People worshipped Rome. You had to worship Rome. I would encourage you to do some secular history on Rome, because they did have to worship them. They did have to have loyalty to Rome. They had to have loyalty to the emperor to really buy and sell all the goods. It's kind of like the Roman Catholic Church. If you weren't a part of that, you were excommunicated. You could not have a wedding. You couldn't have a burial if you weren't a part of the Catholic Church. So the Rome has a control over all of this area, and the way they control that is you have to be loyal to Rome. If you're not loyal to Rome, you're not going to be able to buy and sell. So in order to make my livelihood, I've got to be a part of this system. And then really 666 is, again, when you look at the Revelation, remember, numbers not really standing for what you may think, but the 3 and the idea of 6, 7 is a complete number in the Bible, right? 7 and 10. When you see 7 and you see 10, a lot of times we're talking about completeness. So the idea that he is 666, that he is not perfection, right? He is not God. That's all that is. Again, notice he's the number of a man. The emperor was not divine. The emperor was not a god. The emperor was a man. And the 666 shows that he is not perfect. He is not divine. In fact, he is very much a man. And that's kind of the emphasis there. He is below God. He's a man. And that's really all we need to get from that. See, that's not really exciting when people begin to talk about 666. That's not real exciting when we kind of look at it. But the people, the 7 churches of Asia, it wouldn't make much sense to them to be comforted and to spur on if this is talking about something that's going to happen 2,000 years from now. So that's what we have to keep in mind. If you have questions about Revelation, we may have to save that for another day. We're running out of time. All right, let's go to Daniel 7. Again, if you have someone points to Revelation 13, really bring in some secular history about Rome, that they had to buy and sell under that, and that's pretty, that's worth entertaining about refuting that. But again, when you get into prophecy, and you start looking at this, you begin looking at people that will fit this, and you're reading into that where we don't need to be doing that. Daniel 7, 1 through 8 is easy to kind of break apart, because when you're talking about this little horn rising up, this beast, notice the 4, verse 3, Daniel 7, and the 4 great beasts came out the sea, diverse from one another. Well, that sounds like Revelation, right? This beast coming out of the sea, and at first was like a lion and had eagle's wings and all that, and the second one was like a bear, and then another like a leopard. But these are nations, these are kings, nations coming up. Then in verse 7, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, had a great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. 10 horns, 10 kings, 10 Caesars. It was different from Assyria. It was different from Medo-Persia, or Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. All those had kings. The Roman Empire was a republic initially before Julius Caesar got there, but Rome was a republic. Rome was fierce. It had these great iron teeth, right? If you did not, just like what we talked about with the mark of the beast, if you did not fully commit to Rome, they were against you, and you didn't want Rome against you in that sense. So he's diverse or different. This kingdom is different from the rest of them. You say, well, Ben, how do you know that's a kingdom? Well, the Bible's its own best commentary. Verse 23, in context, thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth. Now, if you go to Revelation 13, and you say that's the Antichrist, and you go to Daniel 7 and say, see, that's the Antichrist. Daniel says that the 4th kingdom, this beast, is not a man. It's a kingdom. Notice he says, the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. So the 10 horns, verse 24, out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So we're going to kind of get into that again, this emperor coming up and doing those things. So again, I'm sorry, that's not really exciting. The beast is not some kind of Antichrist entity coming up to conquer the world. It's Rome. And if you go into secular history and you look at the lion being Babylon, which is oftentimes depicted in the ancient Babylonian artwork, the lion, then you have the bear, again, Medo-Persia. Daniel's other vision, he's raised up on one side, so he's Medo-Persia. Then we find the leopard being Babylon, the leopard is Greece. Then the 4th, so the next empire that rises is Rome after Alexander the Great. So pretty easy to refute. All right, now Daniel 8. 23 and following, we find that this man is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. If you wanted to name your kid something, that would be a good one. Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. If you go back to secular history, he was a very wicked man. He's the man, I wish Tyler Moss and them were still in here. When you go and read about the Maccabees, he was the man that made the Jews offer swine on the altars, right? They were to offer pigs. And we say, well, Jews couldn't do that, right? They were going to offer this unclean animal on the altar of their God, Jehovah God, right? These practicing Jews. And Antiochus Epiphanes was doing this. So when we talk about that, that's not anything to get wound up about either. When you begin to look at this great man that's coming to power, right? This king, this Antichrist. No, go back to verse 21. Again, in the context of the prophecy, you have a ram and you have a goat. The rough goat is the king of Grecia, or Greece. It's Alexander the Great. Even the ram there in verse 20, he's Medo-Persia, 2 horns. The rough goat is the king of Greece. The great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. You can go back and look in history. Alexander the Great, first king of Macedonia. So that's him. That being broken, when Alexander the Great dies, whereas 4 stood up out from it, so 4 generals take over Alexander the Great's empire. He's got a vast empire. He dies at an early age. He has no son to take over his kingdom, so his generals fight it out, and eventually 4 kingdoms come from this. And what we find is the Ptolemies, one of the kings that would come out of that would be Antiochus Epiphanes IV. So, pretty easy, cut and dry, I think, in my sense. It's pretty easy to understand, again, that this ram, this goat, were kingdoms. They're not men, they're kingdoms. So, I don't know, to me that makes a lot of sense. Maybe, I hope it does to you. If you're not, I would study on it. Read secular history about it. I would love, Brittany and I were talking about that, I would love to do a history class just over that stuff. Because if you knew that stuff, going in, you'd be like, okay, yeah, I know what that means now. Maybe one of these days we can do that. All right, any questions or comments about any of those passages? Maybe that I didn't explain very well. We're going to look at where Antichrist is found in the Bible, and then we'll be done after that. Anybody have anything through that? Again, remember, when you read it, if I'm thinking of the Antichrist already and I read those passages, it's easy. It's easy to be like, oh, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the Antichrist. But when I look, and again, when we're talking about studying the Bible in the young adult class, when we look at context, it's like, okay, well, that makes a little more sense. All right, here we go. Then we'll be dismissed on this. So the only time that we actually see the word Antichrist used is only going to occur 5 times in Scripture. It's going to be used twice in 1 John 2:18, and then once in 1 John 2:2 or 2:22, 1 John 4:3, 2 John 7. That's it. That's where we're reading about Antichrist. It's pretty cut and dry in that as well. When you read that John uses this wording of Antichrist, in a sense, we're not even saying the Antichrist, but in 1 John 2:18, little children, it is the last time, or the last dispensation, the last age, as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby you know that it is the last time. So that's who they are right there. Who is an Antichrist? What we're going to find there is someone who denies that Jesus is the Christ and that he's a deceiver. Notice verse 22 of 1 John 2. Who is a liar but he that deceiveth that, or denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, that denieth the Father and the Son. So, going back to that, right? Who's an Antichrist? It's anybody that denies that Jesus is the Christ. If you deny the Father and the Son, guess what? You're Antichrist, which in the name applies you're anti-Christ. You're against it. Anyway, 1 John 4:3, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it shall come, even now already is in the world. So there was already, when you read John, there was already people who were denying that Jesus was the Son of God, already denying that Jesus was the Christ, not long after his resurrection. And it was already at work. So John says, if you see someone, they're Antichrist. Notes there. 2 John 7, for many deceivers are entered into the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an Antichrist. Those are the times that we hear that phrase, or that word Antichrist, in the Bible. And interestingly enough, I looked back in it, in the Greek, when I say, give me a songbook, it could mean any, it's any songbook, but when I say, give me the songbook, I'm looking for a specific one. Nowhere in these do you hear the Antichrist. It's always just an Antichrist, which I thought was worth considering. Not one singular Antichrist. Anyone who practices these things, anyone who deceives, denies that Jesus is the Christ is Antichrist. Now see, that wasn't very complicated. That wasn't very entertaining probably if you thought about the Antichrist, finding out what kind of president, some elected official. People really like that stuff for some reason, but we don't have to worry about that today. We don't have to worry about some ruler coming up and a tribulation coming up. Nothing like that. It's just somebody that denies Christ. He's Antichrist. And these images of Rome, that's pretty cut and dry through the Bible as well. Daniel, Revelation, Rome is the beast, not the Antichrist. Anybody got anything there?
I do.
Yes, sir.
The word Antichrist and the word deer have a whole lot in common, as they can be both
yeah.
used as singular or plural.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Language.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A
Yeah.
lot of people fail to see that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Warren. Yeah, he's making the comment. Yeah, if you think about deer, it could be one or many, and so there's Antichrists. They're around. Antichrist are people who deny that Jesus was the Christ. Yeah, very good. But yeah, sometimes, like I said, we get that kind of idea, kind of like Warren's saying, we get that idea in our head that we're looking for one man, and when we read it, we think of a singular person when it's really not. It's a good point. Anybody else?
Could you repeat the 5 times in the Bible that Antichrist?
Absolutely. It's 1 John 2:18. You have it that's used twice in 1 John 2:18. It's up here on the board too. If you can see, I don't know if you can see it or not. 1 John 2:22 talks about, uses the word Antichrist, kind of like Warren saying, just a Antichrist. 1 John 4:3, an Antichrist. 2 John 7. And again, that's the only time that's used in the Bible. Nowhere connected with any of these other entities. And if you have someone that has a question about this stuff, again, especially with the prophecies, it's good to start with getting an idea of Rome and some of these ancient empires. If you kind of have an understanding of that, even a small, like myself, I don't have a very good grasp of all those things, but I kind of know how they go about. You can look into that and say, okay, well, that makes sense now. All right, very good. I hope that got it for you, Miss Brenda. Did that get it? Maybe not. She's writing it down. So that's all right. Hey, anybody else? Again, sometimes I think when I think we're going to talk about the Antichrist, people get really excited, and really, when you preach on or teach on it, it's not anything to get excited about at all. It's pretty plainly taught, I think. That it? Everybody sufficient? Ready to go out and help those that you know that believe these things? Again, now, if you believe that, right, just do some study. Let's do some study. I don't care to help you. I'll sit down with you. If you think, Ben, I don't know if I agree with you, let's get some coffee and we'll sit and talk about it, and we can go from there. But I think what you'll find through the stuff using these passages are pretty easily to refute. All right. Well, I'll just leave them up there. You don't have to have the other part there. So anyway, all right, that's them. All right. Anybody got anything? All right. Very good.